Hello everyone, welcome to another video on this channel. Today I'm going to be watching and ranking every single Nightmare on Elm Street film. I believe there are 7, however I am unsure of that. I just seem to remember there being 7, so that's the plan. I probably won't be doing Freddy vs. Jason because I might be Freddy'd out by then. However, you never know.
Place your bets, people! See you in the ring, Voorhees!
I know for sure I won't be doing the remake of Nightmare on Elm Street, the Rooney Mara one, because I've seen that before. It was, okay. Really wasn't anything great. It was probably better than the Friday the 13th remake, but it probably wasn't as good as the Texas Chainsaw Massacre one, in my opinion. Yeah, again, that's very important to remember, is that I'm not a movie critic. This is just going to be a fun, easy video that I don't need to make a script for, and I shouldn't have to do much editing because it's just going to be a ranking system, so won't need to outsource many things. It should be fairly easy. But yeah, that's my basic review of the remake. Is it was okay, it wasn't that great. It was pretty brave of them to make Freddy a actual pedophile. I seem to remember that in the original films he was just a killer of children, but I might be wrong in remembering that because, again, I haven't seen these movies in probably 10-ish years. I've rewatched the first one at some point within the last few years, but the rest of them I am pretty blind on. I seem to remember that the first and the third and the last were pretty good. I don't remember much more than that. I think the first and third one are pretty universally loved. And then the last one, The New Nightmare, being very different, was somewhat enjoyable to me. I don't remember if it's actually a good film or not. I just remember enjoying it a lot. So I'm going into this pretty blind, and it should be pretty fun. So at the end of every movie, I will do a little synopsis of my opinion on the film. Like I said before, not a movie critic, so please don't crucify me if I don't love your personal favourite. Yes, this should be a pretty fun video. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the first movie, A Nightmare on Elm Street. So, I just watched the first Nightmare on Elm Street, and to the surprise of no one, it was pretty good. They did well with what they had, and while I don't think it was anywhere near a flawless movie, it was still pretty great. Probably my biggest complaint was the dialogue of all the characters, including Freddy. It was pretty bad. For one, Freddy was having a small identity crisis between silent, cold villain who seemed to just want to kill, and then in other scenes he was showing signs of the more pop culture Freddy that we'll come to see more of in the sequels. I do enjoy the Freddy we get, however I wouldn't mind seeing more of the silent antagonist approach, which I think is more of what the remake did, but
Ain't nobody got time for that!
But yeah, the dialogue between the teenagers was clearly written by a man in his mid-40s and not an actual teenager. I mean, up yours with a twirling lawnmower? What? If the dialogue isn't believable, then the world you built seems less believable, and the audience is less likely to be invested, which is probably why we have a character called Rod, who is pretty much just frustrated sex tension as a character. However, I don't need to think I didn't enjoy this movie, because I did. Some of the scenes are iconic and incredibly well done, and boy, whoever casted Johnny Depp in his debut role sure deserves a And while there was a couple dumb things like how Tina's mum thought that she had cut her nightdress with her nails when it was clearly done by a sharp knife-like object, and how after 7 days of no sleep Nancy remained sane, like...
Are you sure about that?
I know she said the world record was 11 days, but I don't think whoever set that was trying to put up with Robin Gullen turning them inside out. Still not sure how I'm going to rank these movies, but for now I'll say this is number 1 of 7, and if I like any of the others more than that, I'll move this one down. Anyway, on to the second Nightmare on Elm Street. Boy, I sure am glad I chose to be less sober for this one. This one really did not do it for me. The hour and 21-minute runtime felt like 2 hours. Some of the scenes were boring or ridiculous, or both. The canary bird scene in the house is laughably dumb. I was curious as to why this one felt so much worse in every aspect, and it turns out Wes Craven had pretty much nothing to do with this one, and apparently he wasn't even consulted. I don't know how true this is, but it really does feel this way. In the first film, the horror was less about Freddy and more about how none of the adults would believe the kids. This has happened for decades within the horror world, and it's a pretty good tactic, and it usually works, which this film did not. The more we know about Freddy, the less scary he becomes, which is fine if you introduce more creative and comedic plot devices, but this just felt like they tried to do something different, which usually I don't mind, but when it's the sequel to a global phenomenon, it's sort of unwarranted and unneeded. In terms of characters, they feel even more like caricatures, and even though we didn't have much personality from the first class, this one really had nothing. Some of the characters felt like sketches, especially the coach character, who was indistinguishable from the same coach role in The Faculty. This movie also had this strange homoerotic vibe. Don't know if that's just the era, but it seemed pretty strange to me. Honestly, watch this movie and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Overall, this movie was pretty bad, and I really hope this doesn't stay in second place. I went into this one a little too optimistic, but now we're moving on to the third film, Dream Warriors, which is supposedly pretty good. I sure hope so, because this one sucked. So I just finished watching The Dream Warriors, and from the get-go this film just looks so much better. Almost like they brought back the original writer. I really enjoyed this one, to be honest. It wasn't perfect and it definitely felt like the third movie in the series. However, I think I prefer this one to the first one, just because of how much more defined these characters are, as well as the return of Nancy, which I feel like was a great choice. For example, the main character of this one, Kristen, was so much more likeable than whatever the last main dude was called, as well as the characters actually being far more real feeling, and the setting was also pretty great. It was nice to break away from having most of the movie be set in a school or a bedroom, even though I know the film is called A Nightmare on Elm Street. One of the more superior parts of this movie compared to the previous two was how good the effects looked. You would think this movie had tripled the budget, but it was only made with $1.5 million more than the worse in every way second film. It's almost like they had someone with genuine talent back on board. Overall the kills were great and the cast was probably my favourite so far. I don't know if I would argue that this movie is better than the first one, but I personally enjoyed it more, so for me it's going straight to the top of the list. Anyway, on to the fourth movie, The Dream Master. Okay, so we have passed the halfway mark, and if I had to sum up this movie, I would say it was pretty fun. It's fine at what it is, and I did like some aspects of it, mainly how this is the first movie in the franchise that actually feels like a sequel outside of Nancy and Freddy's returning roles. This actually feels like it's connected to the third film. This one did have more horror tropes that the other films didn't feel like they had, but this is the fourth film in the franchise, and when compared to other franchises' fourth films, it is not that bad. It made me laugh how they had to make it clear who this new actress was as they recast the role of Christian from Patricia Arquette to Tuesday Night. Yes, she's seriously called Tuesday Night. I wonder what her siblings are called. Anyway, Patricia Arquette did not want to reprise her role as she wanted to take her career in more of a drama-centered direction, and it looked like it paid off. Anyway, the dialogue does feel like it takes a step backwards and more towards that of a cheesy 80s American school style. Honestly, some of the movie scenes could be edited into Heathers and it would still work pretty well.
Fuck me gently with the chainsaw.
The one character whose unique trait was he liked karate really reminded me of the one guy from the Oblivion ride trailer. If you are English and are between the ages of 20 and 40, you'll probably know what I mean.
Look down.
Overall, I enjoyed this film way more than the second one, but not as much as the first or third. This is the first time I've noticed a computer effect looking really awful. I don't know what that was about. There was computer effects in the first one and they didn't look so bad for the time. The practical stuff still looks really good. I love how it made it feel like more of a nightmare scenario unique to the cast and not just genuinely scary shit. Anything else I have to say about this film is pretty small and petty, like I didn't love how they killed off Christian and the end of battle set wasn't as fun as the asylum from the third film. But overall this film is third for me on the list, way closer to being second than fourth, but that's pretty much all I have to say about it, so I'm going to move on to The Dream Child. Alright, so I just finished the fifth film and they are definitely starting to feel more like the same in terms of content. This one tried to do something pretty different and I appreciate the fact they are still finding new ways to make Freddy a threat after 5 movies. But I think the main reason all these movies feel the same is the fact that Freddy is just an unstoppable force and no matter what our cast does, we know he'll be back in the next movie. Anyways, in terms of specifics, this film was fine. If you've seen the last 4, you probably don't need to see this one. It did have this weird erotic opening which felt a little out of place in this franchise, which when compared to the fact that Freddy reaches peak in terms of being more comedic than scary, it's a pretty weird parallel. Again, the effects in this movie get better and better compared to the sequels and I really did like the comic book stuff, even if it did remind me of that one music video. Again, there was a lot of flaws in this one, but I feel after 5 movies of this shit, nobody was really expecting otherwise. Like, why would you choose to go to work instead of sticking with your friends, one of which is experienced with this shit, and after half the friendship group has been killed while awake? What are you doing? Overall, this movie was just okay. It was better than the second one, and I'm starting to think that Freddy's Revenge may be the worst in the franchise, but we will see. It was cool to see the kid Alan traumatized from Jurassic Park, and the credits song genuinely made me laugh out loud.
Want me to get him? Well, I got him. My mouth is an Uzi, and I shot him.
What is this?
Overall, this movie is 4th on my list for now. Anyway, on to part 6. Freddy's Dead. Oh boy, this one was pretty bad. Unlike the second film, it was very self-aware, so I guess it's not as bad. The opening scene in Spencer's death made it pretty fucking clear they had done a full 180 on the original film and its characters, and you can really tell this was made by the same director who gave us Tank Girl.
I say we kill him.
I say we hump him.
I say we get crumpets and tea.
Tasty.
I mean, this is the first time that Freddy looked straight into the camera like a fucking Looney Tunes skit. This wasn't completely void of story, and I did enjoy learning more about Freddy. Not sure how he managed to have a child and raise her to a somewhat decent age when he's clearly not stable enough to raise anyone. And I did enjoy the nostalgia blast of seeing a young version of John from the Garfield movies. However, the last 2 minutes of this film are some of the worst parts in the entire series. It looks like a parody of the last film, and that one scene of Freddy fucking with the deaf guy was so dumb. Like, basically Freddy has made him super sensitive to sound and then stands above him and drops a needle, and to stop the sound of the needle landing, a guy dives across the room to catch it. Like, I'm pretty sure the sound of a teenager diving against the floor is louder than a single needle, but whatever, not supposed to think about it too much, I guess. Anyway, this film was pretty bad. The 3 films after Dream Warriors have been fine, they've all just kind of been the same shit, new cast, and for me this film is 5th on the list for now. Anyway, on to The New Nightmare, which I remember being pretty good, so I'm hoping it's not as bad as this one. I just finished the final Nightmare film, and I have to say I did enjoy it. I don't think I loved it as much as I seem to remember, but I was probably a young child when I saw it last. The super meta nature of this film was really fun, and I know I said the last couple have been self-aware, but this one really takes the fucking crown in that department. We had Wes Craven playing himself, all the actors were just called their actual names, and we even had an in-world New Line cinema. The new perspective was a breath of fresh air in this franchise, and seeing Robert dressed as Freddy in a world where he is a celebrity was pretty fucking funny. This was also maybe the scariest film since the first film, and I do say scary with hesitation. I don't think any of these films are objectively scary. I will be making a video on actually scary movies near Halloween, and this series has not come close to that. As well as this film being somewhat scary, it actually had a decent plot. For the first time in 4 movies, I actually wanted to give this my full attention and see where the story went. Again, this isn't a perfect movie, and the biggest reason for this is the child actor. A lot of this movie lived or died on his performance, and boy was he ever awful. Aside from the child acting, the only part that stood out as objectively dumb was the motorway scene. Like, I'm somewhat sure these cars wouldn't continue at normal speed if a woman and her levitating child were in the middle of the road. But overall, this one was pretty decent, and I'm going to say it was 3rd on my list. I would have said it was better than Dream Warriors, have they cast a child that could actually act, but yeah, that's pretty much it. So there's my list overall. If you're unsure of which one is which chronologically, here are the numbers of release. I'd say that these 3 are actually worth a watch. These ones, if you're bored, you can probably skip them, and I wouldn't watch these ones again if I was being paid to. To be honest, you could probably cut out all of them aside from the 1st, 3rd and last, and still have a complete story. It's probably what I would do if I was ever going to watch these things again. They aren't the worst collection of film, but they're clearly a reason behind there being so many of them, and I'm going to guess it wasn't passion or integrity. The shunning of Wes Craven for a bunch of these films in order to bring in directors who would work for a cheaper budget was pretty shitty, but not entirely surprising. I'm not too sure how to conclude this. I've kind of said everything I wanted to say as we went, and I'm sure by now this video is longer than I expected. Overall, the 3rd was my personal favourite, but I think the 1st is the objectively better movie. I really liked Nancy, Kristen, Taryn, Spence, Debbie and Robert when he wasn't Freddy, and my favourite death was probably Debbie's. I don't think it was the best effects wise, but I remember that one even before I watched these again, and something about it was pretty disturbing. But yeah, all that things to say now, so if you watched this far then thank you. I will be doing another one of these pretty soon. I'm just waiting for 2 of the 4 movies to arrive because I need a physical copy to record and use clips from. Luckily, this series has 3 less movies than the Elm Street stuff, so I should be able to make that video a lot quicker. Here's a little hint as to what the series will be. So yeah, thank you for watching, and goodbye for now.